Never. Right. Okay. Okay. So what we are going to do, we're going to go live online for the first time in ages. And we're gonna update that, and we're gonna go like this. We're gonna go. Hang on a minute. We're gonna bring that down there. Sorted. Right. We've got Battle of Newport, personal perspective. So we got that. And you know what we're gonna do? I want you to start thinking a moment. All right. Right. Just and I want you to start thinking. Right. I want you to think. Right. What do you know about the Battle of Newport? What am I talking about? Right. Um, so don't need to say anything yet. What I'm going to do is I want to share this, right, to see if we can get a couple more people up here, right, which should be good because we haven't had our gang on for a while, right? So we got to get that right. And we got Turkey here, so you know it's he's happy. Joe, he's being stroked now. I got to keep the turkey stroking up, right? Do you want proof of me stroking a turkey? There you go.
Please.
Go on then. There he is.
Ah, lovely fella.
Yeah. So what we should really do is call this the Battle of Newport with a turkey.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I think we need to get things right in life. Don't you? Do you agree?
I do heavily agree.
And so we're gonna post this to somewhere else as well, right? And see maybe if we can have 1 million people joining. Oh my
Whoa.
God! Is it you? Is it you watching, or is it just there is somebody else watching?
That's somebody else watching.
What? A randomer watching?
A random.
Do you know what? I like. Do you like random chocolates?
Yes, I suppose.
Oh, okay. We're nearly into the Battle of Newport territory, right? And we're gonna see it. We're gonna post a little bit more. And we're gonna do. There he is. Oh, that's it. Another one. And we're just going to post one more, and we'll get fully started. Then I'll ask you my big questions of life, right? And that's what we're going to do. Yeah, he's enjoying this. Turkey is. Now he does struggle sometimes, in life. I think do we all struggle in life?
I think we do.
Right, cool. Right, okay then. Oh my God. So we'll get that one there. Right. So okay. So let's get started. Right. So we're just going to put something else up there. And here we go. Excellent. Right. So what do we know about the Battle of Newport?
John Frost.
Is this because you hang on, stop a minute. Is this because you looked up on the internet, which is good that you've done a bit of research?
I did this in school.
Oh wow. Oh right. You did this in school. That's absolutely brilliant. So when did you do this in school?
About 6 months ago.
6 months ago. Right. So I think, do you know what we're going to do? We're gonna see if we can get an image up here, right? And see if we can sort of what we're going to do is there you go. So you remember this image then?
Yes.
Right. So tell me a bit more about this whole thing before we go on to a couple of facts. What can you remember? Because okay, we know the date is 1839, right? We're doing a personal perspective. Just chuck a few facts at me. So it was at school. I would say it wasn't called the Battle of Newport, was it? It was called the Newport Rising. So tell me some more. okay, here we go. Obviously, it happened in Newport, which is sort of between Cardiff and Chepstow, right? So what else?
Let's see. Yeah. Well, wasn't it the townspeople? They were trying to well, kill. I'll say conservatives or overrun them in this now a restaurant, I believe, or a cafe
Yeah.
building. And the I'll say conservatives then fought back with thousands of soldiers, and well, all hell broke loose.
Do you know what? Like, you know, the words that you've used, conservative. I think that's, even though sort of conservatives didn't really exist in name back then, what you're referring to, conservative, is actually correct. Sort of people who were establishment, who were government, who like were in control. So I'll accept that one, right? And you're saying that was it thousands of Chartists fought back, or thousands of the King's men? What are we talking about?
The Chartists, yeah, that's it.
Right, the Chartists, right? Okay. You know, we've got some good facts there. So the reason I think, let me explain. I think the reason why I'm referring to it as a battle, right, is because it was a battle, right? There was that, you know, if you want to define a battle, right, there's two sides. And there's a song by Frankie Goes to Hollywood, right? And it's two sides go to war, right? And you know, there's two sides in it. And what we do see, if you do type this into the internet, the Battle of Newport, you sort of get things like Battle of Newport in America and so on. But what we can say, we'll call it the Newport Risings, and it occurred in November 1839 on a Monday, 1839, the 4th. I don't know if that's got any relevance, 4th of November. And these people in Newport, as you rightly said, wanted the conservative people rather than, you know, the Conservative Party, which didn't exist back then. And conservative basically means people that don't want change, right? So, which is a bit harsh of me to say, but people who like the status quo, people who like things to remain the way they are, right? And these people said, look, you know, we are in charge of the country, right? Everything's going okay. But the people who set themselves up, the Chartists, right? These people themselves said, look, you know, we want something else to happen with our country. And they had been saying this for quite some years. And what we are thinking, there you go, that this is the building you were talking about. It wasn't in fact a cafe, but it was a building, so you got the building bit right. They actually wanted back then, not many people could vote, right, in elections. And it wasn't until the time of the First World War that women were actually properly able to vote, you know. So it would be a long time, and these people wanted the right to vote. They wanted to decide who's in charge of the country. Like, you know, you mentioned the Conservatives. So basically, what you're talking about is the Tories and the Whigs, right? There were two main political parties then: the Tory Party, which would eventually become the Conservative Party, and you had the Whig Party, which would eventually become the Liberal Party, right? So the one thing is that there were these Chartists, and you are right in what you said. You said there were thousands of people involved. So there were up to 4,000 Chartists. And these 4,000 Chartists marched on Newport. You know, Newport itself, which was a very famous port back then, is still very famous today. They also they wanted the right to vote. They wanted proper democracy. They wanted, you know, when they give their vote in, they didn't want anyone to know who you're voting for. So, for example, you know, if you vote for the Whig Party or the Tory Party, right, nobody should be allowed to know who you voted for, right? Because if you work for somebody who stands for Parliament, you know, it's wrong for them to know whether you're voting for them or not, right? So this is what we're talking about. So the leader was a guy by the name of, give me the name, guy's leader, give me the leader of the rising again, because you said it earlier on.
John Frost.
John Frost, and they named the square in Newport after John Frost. So they marched on Newport, right? And some of them had marched a very, very long distance to march on Newport. And 4,000 of them marched on Newport, a huge group. They were marching to the Westgate Hotel in the center of Newport. So you mentioned a cafe, so you could be right, because
Well,
they're going to be served.
I thought it was a cafe today.
Yeah, Baldrick agrees. So the people involved, and this is, can I give my own perspective, right? The people involved in this, these people, right? The people involved in it. This is actually, I think this is actually from the Peterloo massacre that happened a few years earlier, right? This is from the Peterloo massacre, which was a massacre after the Napoleonic War in Britain, right? But people had been really upset that their rights as people, as humans, had been completely ignored. And they marched on the Westgate Hotel, and the people involved were like normal people. They had come from industrial towns, from the valleys. They were coal miners. They were people who were shopkeepers, and people who generally wanted change. They wanted something different, and they had most of the weapons that they had available, right? And there's an image as they're marching on, all similar sort of. They're coming on mass with their banners and all the rest of it, right? They've made their own weapons, but some of them, right, actually had proper weapons, right? So marchers from industrial towns outside of Newport, these protesters were demanding not only that they had the right to vote, but some of the early people that had gone into Newport to protest had been arrested, right? They had been arrested by the police, and they were being held in this hotel, the Westgate Hotel, right? So they not only did they want their right to vote, they actually want the people who had earlier been arrested, right? So can you remember doing that in school?
Yeah.
So in other words, earlier people, they had been arrested by the police, were held in the hotel. So now the mob, the group of people, wanted more than just rights. They wanted the people that had been arrested freed. They wanted them freed, right? So what we're going to do some facts and figures. We like doing some facts and figures. So if you want to say that these people weren't that successful in what they did, right? They weren't that successful because they didn't immediately have the right to vote. The people that they were trying to release, just really wasn't happening. And the people who were leading the rising of over 4,000 people, maybe 5,000 people or more, right? They were also arrested, right? So I don't know if you mentioned earlier on that you had the people who ran Newport. They were the people that the Chartists were fighting against. They were also the very early police that tried to keep law and order in Newport. Very different from the modern police, by the way. And the British Army were involved as well. Yeah. And they were all led by a guy by the name of Thomas Phillips, right? They were led by this Thomas Phillips bloke. And what we've got, again, this is on the 4th of November, 1839. And the people who are leading the the Chartists were John Frost. Can you remember any of the other two?
No.
What about a guy by the name of William Jones? And also, listen to this name, Zephaniah Williams. What a great name. I've got to be honest with you, Zephaniah Williams. It's such a brilliant, wonderful name, Zephaniah Williams, right? So Zephaniah Williams is also, you know, another guy who's involved in this sort of the rising, you know, getting the Chartists out there. You know, they were so basically it was the Chartists versing the establishment, or as you said, the Conservatives, right? So that's a really good thing, right? So we'll get there. So the big question is, right, were there between 4,000 and 5,000 Chartists involved, right? The answer is we will never know. However, this is a really important point. And do you know when I don't know, you know when when we've done things like this, right, and we've looked at battles, there's always one side that loses more people than the next, right? On this occasion, the Chartists have at least 50, 60 odd people wounded from bullet wounds, right? And the tragic thing is that 22 Chartists are killed. On the side of on the side of the law and order, on the side of the king, on the, as you call it, the Conservatives, on the side of this, right? There are 60 soldiers, right, from the 45th Regiment of Foot, right, and British Army, and there were 500 other individuals on the other side, right? Now, it didn't seem equally matched, but the Chartists were not a trained army, right? Most of them, those that did have weapons, probably really couldn't fire them properly anyway, right? And there were it's apparently only four of those that were defending the Westgate Hotel, only four. That's an interesting figure. Only four were actually wounded, right? And one of those wounded was the commanding officer, this Thomas Phillips, right? So, so the other interesting thing is, and can you remember? You know when we said at the beginning today, right? What we said at the beginning, we said that they wanted a secret ballot, they wanted the right to vote, right? Now, can you remember anything else that they told you that these people actually wanted as demands? What else did they want? Think about what society is like today, Stav. So what else could these people have wanted?
Freedom.
That's a good word. We're going to get that one. The Chartism in Wales began in 1836, not in Newport. It happened in West Wales, in Carmarthenshire. And these people within this rising, right, by the 12th of July, 1839, these people wanted more than just a right to vote. They obviously they wanted their secret ballot. They also wanted something that is taken for granted today, right? So, Stav, if you stood for Parliament back then, right, and you were like you or me, right, a normal job, you know, trying to go to work and so on, right, you wanted a right to be paid. So in other words, working as an MP was to be classed as a normal job, an everyday job, right? And you'd be able to focus on that job. And in other words, focusing on that job, you wouldn't need another job, right? You wouldn't need another job to support yourself, right? Unfortunately, if you stood for Parliament, then you weren't paid. So you'd be expected to go to London, right? And you'd be expected to pay for everything, right? And as a poor person like you and I, Stav, we wouldn't have an income, right? So we couldn't really be an MP. So these people wanted a right to actually stand up there and stand for Parliament, and they wanted to be paid, right? And also, the one stipulation of being able to vote, right? The one stipulation of being able to vote was actually you didn't need to own a house, right? So if you owned a lot of property back then, you were able to vote, right? But if you didn't own a house, you weren't able to vote. What's fair about that? Is it? It's not fair, is it?
No.
So these people wanted lots of things. They wanted freedom. They wanted to be free, and this was not a world that life was to be free, right? So what happened is that these people sat down and they said, right, they said, right, what we need to do, right, we need to go to Newport, but there would have been spies in amongst their midst. There would have been people who were saying, this is happening, right? We this is going to happen, right? So they were telling the authorities. And did you know somebody in amongst us has actually been in a? I was actually in the series. It was about the history of Wales, and I was actually one of the Chartists. And mind you, Stav, right? I was a dead Chartist.
Oh.
I was. And I tell you, weird thing was, Stav, right? I was. I had not done any acting at that stage. It was my first extra role, right? I was a Chartist in this, and it was like Hugh Edwards was there presenting it, and we were told to just lie in a shed for like 2 hours dead.
Oh.
And guess who fell asleep snoring?
You?
Me, yeah. And you know what? They had to wake me up because what they wanted to do, they wanted to film us dead on the floor, right? They wanted to film us dead on the floor. So this is the thing. It's just like it brought me close to the tragedy of the event, right? I was really dressed as not a pirate, as a Chartist, and you thought, right, I'm dead in a shed, right? And what we were doing, we were acting as a load of dead people in a shed, right? And one of the things that they did, right? They made sure that we were dead, right? So in other words, the British soldiers were really angry that they had to fight these Chartists. So some of the people who were dying, they deliberately killed them. And that's one fact that you're not told in history, is it? So in other words, the 22 people who died, most of them could have lived, but they were deliberately killed, right? In revenge for the 4 wounded soldiers. There's nothing fair about that, is there? So what happened? They basically prepared for months and months and months for this rising. And the thing is, right, Stav, surely somebody's going to find out about it, and they did. They did. The authorities knew that this was happening, right? And they gathered the momentum, right? And they marched. They marched. But the thing is, when you think about it, the preparation took months. The authorities were aware. And the march had been gathering momentum for over the course of the whole weekend, right? The Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So people are going to be thinking, oh, what's happening? What's happening? It didn't happen just like that. If it happened just like that, maybe they would have had more success. John Frost and his associates marched down from the industrial valleys and marched to Newport. And some of them armed themselves with pikes, bludgeons, which is like a bit of wood, right, and firearms. But it was not an army, right? And a mob like this is not able to take on a proper army, so they marched into Newport. And the exact rationale for the confrontation remains. We what people thought, they thought these people were really angry that you've already arrested some of their number and you've taken them to the Westgate Hotel. They really want justice. They really want to be given the right to vote. They really do. Let's see if we can find another image. There we go. There they are. The thing is, what I find unfair about this image, right, is that these guys have got firearms on the outside and these people inside have got firearms. I'm a bit confused why some of the people inside weren't killed. Do you find that strange?
Yeah.
Do I've always, look at the figures, right? 22 Chartists are killed, right? 50, 60, 70 are wounded, right? I've already told you why some of the Chartists ended up dead, right? Because they were deliberately killed afterwards. As they were dying in sheds, they were bayoneted whilst they were still alive, right? However, none of the soldiers were killed, and I just don't understand why that was. I don't understand it. Maybe some of the soldiers were killed, but they didn't want people to know. I don't know. So Frost's was not too sure that people should be violent or not. And the Chartist movement in Southeast Wales was chaotic. And, people were really angry. The thing is, it's likely that the Chartists weren't really able to kill any of the soldiers inside the building, or even if they killed one or two. They were really angry, and trying to fight and fire whilst you're really angry isn't going to work. It's not going to work, right? And there were a few other things that stopped the Chartists killing any of the guys inside the building. Right? I'm trying to go with a narrative. I'm trying to give a few different perspectives. It had been raining heavily, right? So with it raining heavily, it probably meant that the gunpowder that the soldiers were using, that the Chartists were using to shoot the people inside, was damp, right? So you can imagine, Stav, if you've got these would have been musket balls, right? These were muskets they were firing, right? So they may have fired the musket balls, but the musket balls may have fallen short of hitting the people inside the building, right? And so what happened? They met outside Newport, a place called Rogerstone, and there were lots of delays, right? And they started off really early. In the daylight, then they got to daylight hours, and the march progressed down the valleys on the Sunday, getting down slowly and slowly and slowly. It got very congested. They basically spent the night out in the open, really getting soaking wet because they were depressed, right? And some of them went home. They thought, we're not going to do this, right? But some of them went. Imagine that they're all wet. The weapons that they're carrying are wet. Most of them hadn't eaten, right? The gunpowder's wet. And it was, at that point, some of them were thinking, hang on a minute, right? If we don't turn up for work the next day, on the Monday, we're going to get the sack, right? So right too, if people don't turn up for work, and consistently don't turn up for work, they deserve to be out of a job. So the fact of the matter is that these people were worried that they're going to lose their jobs. Right at this stage, Stav, can you remember anything else? And you are right about the Westgate Hotel. It is used for various different things today. And there is a cafe there, but anyway, carry on. Anything else that you can remember?
Not really, no.
So if it hadn't been a wet day, right? If they had started probably off a little bit later, and nobody had been made aware that they were marching on to Newport, right? they may have succeeded in whatever they wanted to do, right? Yeah. So rumors of a possible Chartist rising and alleged violence elsewhere, you know, it was clear that something was happening, that this big event in history was happening. And this is a big event in our history. It really, really is. The sheer scale of the rising, however, was not fully appreciated. So in other words, people were made aware in Newport, right? But even though people were made aware in Newport, they thought, all right, it's just going to be a load of people coming in the streets. It's not going to be much to worry about. It's not going to be. It's really not going to be much to worry about, right? So what they did do, however, they thought they'd arrest a couple of people, right? And then one of the Chartist leaders, a certain Henry Vincent, was actually imprisoned in Monmouth, and then they thought, right, that's where they were thinking that people were going to gather. So Monmouth is a few miles away from Newport. It's northeast of Newport, right? That's where they thought the Chartists were going to go, right? They thought, all right, the Chartists are not going to be much of a problem, right? There's only going to be a few of them, and they thought, it's not going to be much of a problem, right? However, Stav, right? By the Sunday, they were sort of aware, the authorities in Newport, by the Sunday the 3rd, they were starting to think, right, something is happening, right? So the mayor of Newport was basically ready, right? They were ready, right? They were very, very ready that something was happening, right? So that, they arrested some of the Chartists in Newport. They just chucked them in a prison cell, right? And in the Westgate Hotel, it was a temporary prison, right? And it was thought that there were going to be 10,000 Chartists. As you know, Stav, there was anything between 1,000, 4,000, and 5,000. So not all the Chartists got there. So the narrow streets of Newport were really, really narrow then. Well, the streets of Newport are narrow today, but back then they were really, really narrow streets. So however many people marched through the streets, there would have, when you think about it, Stav, there wouldn't have been a massive number of people. They would have clogged the streets, right? And there wouldn't have been a massive number of people, right? So they arrived. They basically they were filing down what's known as Stow Hill into the centre of Newport, and they were outside the hotel at 9:30 a.m. So think about it, Stav, right? They're really depressed, these Chartists. Some of them are thinking they're going to lose their jobs because they've gone on this march, right? What else? What else do they feel, Stav? They haven't eaten. They were wet, right? And some of them are thinking, what the hell are we doing here, right? Is this really worth it? I'm sure, Stav, some of them would have been thinking, why do we need to vote? Do you know, Stav, right? Have you ever thought about voting?
Not really.
Are you interested in voting?
Not necessarily.
Some of these people were actually thinking that. They were thinking, right, what is the point in voting, because nothing changes? And in fact, in modern day politics, nothing changes. The Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, and people in the Labour Party are as evil and as wrong as each other. Nothing changes, right? But the back then, some people were actually thinking like that whoever you vote for is not going to change anything, right? So what's the point? But these people were already in the protest, and there was nothing they could do. There were women there, there were children there were men there were old men there were young men there were everybody there, right? And even, Stav, I've given you maybe the wrong impression. There were actually people there were actually some business owners there as well, right? Who went along to work out why their staff had gone to there as well. Maybe they were being sympathetic, right? But what happened next? As they gathered into the hall, right? And not the hall. As they started going, as they gathered into this square, which isn't a great square, right? You can't get tens of thousands of people in there, right? A few hundred people at most, right? So what was happening is the people in the square, right, were trapped. They were trapped. There's nowhere they could go. And the same thing happened at the Peterloo massacre a few years earlier, right? People were trapped in a square. It was the same. It was the same thing over again, right? And maybe actually what we could do next week, or when I see you next, we could do the Peterloo massacre. That would be really, really good, because that was even more terrible than this. But then again, anybody's life, Stav, anybody dying for anything like this is tragic. One person dying for something like this is just tragic, right? So what happened next was that as they're outside the Westgate Hotel, they're saying, give us our rights. And some people were saying, hang on a minute, forget about our rights, right? Release the other Chartists, release the other Chartists, please release the Chartists. We want the Chartists out there, right? Now, the Westgate Hotel's doors were barricaded, right? They nobody's going to be able to get in. And this is a little mural. Now this is a nice little mural. I'm not sure I think that might actually still be there. I'm not sure. But anyway, I remember seeing this, right? So they were shouting, right? And the men inside the building were panicking. They thought, right, we're in trouble, right? We're in deep trouble. Something is going to happen to us inside this building, right? So shots were fired. By who? Who fires the first shots?
The soldiers.
And was it because what I said? I think we're right. Shots were fired by the soldiers inside the building. They fired the first shots. And I tell you what, Stav, everybody panicked because they were not expecting to be fired upon. They did not expect to be fired upon. They thought there's no way they're going to shoot at us, right? This is not what's going to happen, right? Nobody is going to fire at us, right? We are safe. At the end of the day, these people inside the building are basically, maybe, they were like them really, but they were just in uniforms. They thought, right, this isn't going to happen, right? But they fired the first shots, and there was absolute panic. It was actually, other people said it was actually a Chartist that fired the first shot, right? But whatever happened, the soldiers were said to be defending themselves, the hotel, and keeping their prisoners safe, right? Keeping their prisoners safe. Now, despite being greatly outnumbered by the large and very angry crowd, the soldiers probably had more guns than the crowd of hundreds and hundreds of people in the square. If every single person in that square had a gun, right, there's no way the soldiers could have survived, right? But obviously, the people in the square did not have enough guns. They just did not have enough firepower, right? So this is the thing. That the soldiers inside had superior firepower, which soon broke the crowd. The Chartists did manage to enter the building temporarily. They managed to get into the building. I didn't know that, but they managed to get into the building. I don't know how they got into the building. They must have opened a door or something else. They managed to get into a building, but somehow some of them managed to get into the building temporarily, right? But then they were forced to retreat. So the problem with this is that they were really disorganized. The Chartists were so disorganized. Actually, some of them wanted a meal. They wanted a cup of tea. They wanted to go home. It may sound strange, but do you know what? Do you know what Napoleon used to say?
No.
An army marches on its stomach, and without food, most of these people were just but they couldn't get out the square. The people in the square couldn't get out because there were people blocking the street. They just couldn't get out. So nobody could get out of this, right? So after After a fiercely fought battle, and the battle only lasted half an hour. We do believe it was 22 Chartists were killed, but maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe there were a lot more Chartists who were killed. And Stav, give me a reason why we think more Chartists were killed and we didn't know about them. Give me a reason why.
Well, the the soldiers wanted the people to feel empathy for them instead of the Chartists. So
that's a good point, right? Okay, you've done it from the other way round. I want you to do it from the other way round. I want you to do it from the Chartist perspective. Not you are very, 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 very right, right? But give me a view from the Chartist perspective. Okay, you're a dad, right? And your son's in front of you and he's killed, right? Your son is obviously living in your house, right? If the authorities know that your son is dead and you are his dad, they will know that you went on the Chartist rising, right? So the best way of you keeping out of this is to take your son's body home. That's why. That is why. So we do believe that more Chartists were killed than we are told. We don't know if it was 5 more or 10 more, but it was certainly more than 22. Right? Certainly much more than 22. Right? And some people say that they were murdered. Right? Well, it's a very difficult word, that murdered. Were the soldiers defending themselves? If you've got people in the street and they're screaming, you're not, and what's going to happen, Stav, right, is you're firing out of windows and you can't see anything, right? It's all smoke in front of you. It's all smoke in front of you. So you're just firing in at the blank, right? You don't know what you're firing at, right? It's just, there's plumes of smoke, there's plumes of smoke, there's plumes of smoke, right? So the thing is, at the end of the day, with plumes and plumes of smoke, you know, the hang on a minute. There you go, lovely. With all the plumes of smoke, you're not going to be able to see, what's going on. So you're going to keep firing. You're not going to know if there's anyone still there, and you're going to think that if you don't keep firing, they're going to get to you. So this is what's happening. This is a tragedy of this whole thing. It's another illustration there. So they're just defending themselves, and there may have been 100 Chartists wounded, right? Because if you're seen to be wounded, Stav, right, they're going to know you were there, and they're going to know you're a Chartist. So if you're wounded, you're going to want to get home as quickly as possible, right? And you're going to have to go to work the next day with a bullet, a lead shot inside you, hoping that your manager's not going to notice. And then you're going to have to explain to your manager that you were ill the previous day. Do you know what I mean? So the people, your bosses are going to be the same people as these. They're going to, the conservatives, as you refer to them as, right? So the Mayor Thomas Phillips, it's said the mayor himself was wounded as well. So the mayor himself, a certain Thomas Phillips, who had ordered this defense, the two of the constables, were wounded, and one of the soldiers. So the commanding officer is this Thomas Phillips, the man. So what we are talking about is that after the battle, the Chartists just ran. They left their weapons in the streets. They just had to run. It was absolute carnage. It's also said that one eyewitness, which is somebody who was there, reported he spoke to one man wounded with a gunshot, lying on the ground, pleading for help until he died an hour later. So it's quite possible that lots of Chartists could have survived, but they didn't. They were either taken to a shed and deliberately killed, right, by the people, by the soldiers. So some of the Chartist dead were buried in a local church known as St. Rouleau's Parish Church. An urban myth persists that some of the bullet holes from the skirmish remained in the masonry of the hotel entrance porch until into modern times. We don't really know that. In reality, the Westgate Hotel has been rebuilt since the uprising. So the building that you see that is the Westgate Hotel today, and with the cafe there, it's actually been rebuilt, but it's in the same spot. So, and they say that some of the damage that people were talking about with the Westgate Hotel were actually damage from the Second World War. So as we get to the end of this, the aftermath staff is that they did find 200 of the Chartists, 200 more of the Chartists, right? And 21 of them were charged with the highest of treason against the king, right? These people were tried with the highest thing ever, right? All three of the people leading the rising, right? The three main figures to lead, right? John Frost, Zephaniah Williams, and William Jones were found guilty on the charge of high treason, and they were sentenced to death. And we all know about hung, drawing, and quartering, don't we, Stav? Are you still there, Stav?
Hello?
Are you still there? What we know about
my mic stopped working then.
right, what we know about hung, drawing, and quartering?
Know about
Yeah, if you're hung, drawn, and quartered.
hung, drawn.
Hung, drawn, and quartered. Three of them were sentenced to being hung, drawn, and quartered. Do you know what that is? Basic. Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Basically, you're hung nearly till you're dead, but you're not quite dead, right? You're still alive when the next thing happens, right? Your stomach is ripped open, right? And all your organs, people are allowed to see your organs, right? So as you're still alive, right? Your bowels, your entrails, everything is ripped out of you, right? As you're still alive, right? At which point your head is cut off, right? So at that point you're dead, and your body is chopped into 4 bits. Got it?
Yeah.
Maybe 5 bits, because you obviously it is 5 bits because you're beheaded, and then you're the top bit of your body and one of your arms is sort of taken away, and your leg and part of the other body, and it's sent all the way around Britain, right? And this was going to be the last time that people in this country were sentenced to be hung, drawn, and quartered, right? However, there was a national petition, right? I think it was millions of people signed a petition to say, please don't do this, right? This is terrible. You know, they had lost their friends and family, right? Please don't do this, right? So they were transported out of the country for life, right? They were transported to the new lands for life, right? And testimonies exist from contemporaries, and basically what happened really was, it, you know, this was a terrible event in our history, right? But slowly but surely, all the things, slowly but surely, eventually, all the things that these people wanted, you know, a wage for members of parliament, this sense of freedom, not having to have property to vote, being able to vote, all these things, regular parliament, set times for parliaments, all these things, they actually eventually allowed. And John Frost was eventually given an unconditional pardon, right? And in 1856, he was allowed to come back to Britain, right? So, all these things, and Chartists were classed as heroes. So, any questions that you'd like to ask, Stav, before we finish?
No.
No, was that good?
Yeah, that was good.
Good. So, are we able to? What are you available next week?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I am. Yeah.
Okay. No, that would be absolutely brilliant. That would be absolutely brilliant. So, excellent. So, okay. Okay then. Hang on, if we get back onto the screen, right? If we get back onto the screen, and we stop that. Right. So you haven't got anything else you want to say?
No, it's okay.
I think that was pretty good stuff. You remember their stuff?
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. So what are you going to do for the rest of the day now?
I'm going to Cardiff with my friend Kai. So that's nice.
Oh, we love Kai. We love Kai. When are we going to see Kai next?
I'll ask if he can do next week. I'm pretty sure I'm here. So in Dennis.
Right. All right. If he is there, make sure he gets over, right? So, yeah. I gotta have a lie down after this. I'm not feeling too great. So, yeah, I've just had one of those long weeks. I can have a cup of tea and I can have a lie down and yes, and maybe have a what should I have, Stav? Should I have an apple pie, a little apple pie, or a Mr. Kipling's with a cherry on top? Your choice. Which one should I have?
You gotta have that apple pie.
I'm having the apple pie for you. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Go.
Brilliant. Well, that's been good. I'm sorry about we had a little bit delay in the middle. Do you know what we should do? I want to do the Peterloo Massacre next week.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've done that in school, but we'll do the Peterloo Massacre, and then I want to talk a little bit about Dick Penderyn. That's another thing altogether.
All right.
All right then. Well, hopefully we'll see Kai next week with you, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Okay. I'll see you next week then.
Okay. See you next week, Stav, and go from there. Take care.
Bye.
Cheers, Stav. Bye. 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 Anyway, I'm gonna have a lie down now, and I'm just gonna chill out, and we'll go from there. Sort of, yes. Thank you very, very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stop live streaming, like and subscribe, and goodbye from Boulder.